Again, folks, Brother Peter with tidbits from the Word. Every now and then, you run across a book other than the Bible, but it's so narrated and so astute by the author that you can't put it down. Have you ever set a package of Oreo cookies beside you and a big tall glass of milk? And you eat 4 or 5 of them, you say, this is the last one, no more. And you get it, and then a few minutes later, they're still there, and you say, well, maybe I eat one more. Well, I have come across a book. God has put a book in my path. It is called But God Can, by an author of Robert V. Ozment. I suspect millions of people in the world have heard of him. But this little advertisement I'm going to do right here is for those of you who have not heard of him or not read behind him. He's introduced here by Charles L. Allen. I can understand why Charles Allen wanted to introduce this man. He's probably one of the most astute writers that I've ever read behind, and I have a library of a couple thousand books. I have literally tons of books, and I've read many of them. But when I read and I can't put the book down, and the author has just appealed to the spiritual side of my life, I love it. Now, his introduction is God tends to specialize in the impossible. He comes to the resounding promise of these triumph texts, inspirational message. Everything has an inspirational message to it. It's either a live one or a dead one, but it's an inspirational message. I love it when they're alive. Now, the authority addressed and confessed and the pessimistic generation, but God can speak with flaming conviction and resounding challenge of compelling new horizons of hope, of the adequacy of Christian faith to meet today's every test. What Mr. Charles Allen is saying here is that But God Can is the book that overrides the books that say this is not possible. It's not possible. It's not possible. It's not possible. I've read some of those books. I don't like reading those books. I like reading those books that say it is possible. It is possible. It is possible. But God can. That's the thing. Few of contemporary men's assorted problems and pressures, including those of grief and death, and I have that book, Grief and Death, and overlook in those profoundly illustrated pages, as Robert V. Ozment articulately affirms the nature of divine grace. Listen, believe me when I tell you, I read a lot. Believe me when I tell you, the Holy Spirit will get a hold of you in this book. But God can. The nature of divine grace. The absence of faith. He asserts is an open invitation to fear and anxiety. I'm telling you right now, you can have faith in this book. By the way, God gave me this book, and it happens to be signed by him. Best wishes. I appreciate that. He's a pastor. And he went to school in several different places. In North Carolina, in Massachusetts, the Emory University, and he's a speaker, and he engages its informality of, it's not a formal, it's an informal, yet it is formal. Writing, the way he writes. The portrait that he paints in this book for a Christian is the absolute exact portrait that needs to be painted for every Christian. If you are going to say, but God can, you must get in line with God so that he can. If you are not in line with him, he can't. So it's very important to be in line with God. He dedicated this book to his mom and daddy, whose wish and counsel and unceasing prayer, his counsel and unceasing prayer, the Christian example left an indelible mark on my life, he says. You'll have to forgive me. At the age of 30, I was an alcoholic. I got saved. 1972, November 5th, 3 o'clock in the morning, wrecked my car, got out. God knocked on my heart and he said, your number's up. I said, Lord, forgive me, I'm a sinner. Come in my heart and save my soul, and he did. Well, at 30 years old, I could not read. I had been a dyslexic speller and a person who could not read. I got the Bible on record, put it on my ears, in the microphone, put it on my ears, and I listened through the Bible, and I underlined the Bible through. And I learned how to read by reading the Bible. I still have a problem with books, because I have a problem pronouncing words that I can't get the two letters together to make them work right. So forgive me for my incoherent reading of books. But you put me in the Bible now, and I can put a good person to shame. Because I've learned Bible language, and I've learned to talk, and I've learned how to spell, and I've learned how to say it. So I've learned that. But listen, he's a doctor of philosophy with a common touch. I love it. I can feel that touch. I can read his book and feel that touch. Do I know the man? No, I don't know the man. I know him by his writing. I know that God is with him as he's writing. And I know that during this time, when he was attending graduate school and university, he also was in close touch with people. That's something I am. I'm in close touch with people all the time. That is my duty. I go out every day. Get up sometimes 3 o'clock in the morning, do an excerpt on here, and then go to the station down here and try to win a soul to the Lord that's traveling on the highway. And be in touch with people. Be in touch with people. You don't have to be a graduate from a university to be in touch with people. He mastered his subjects in the classroom and also felt a heartbeat for the multitudes. He worked his way through school, preaching in rural churches and in the South, in city churches in the East, and even for a time lived in New York, famous Bowery. Hey, the Lord's blessed me. I've been in the East, was born in Maine. I've been in the South and live in the South now in Georgia. And I know that the The difference between the two is great. But here's a man that's writing to both, and it's the same. Wow. After completing his work at Harvard and Boston University, he served as a pastor in a large church in Cuba, Havana, Cuba. Later at a college church in Georgia, and is now a pastor at some other church somewhere else. In But God Can, Dr. Ozment shows penetrating insight in 8 important areas. I love that word. Do you know that I'm 76? They sell spray cans of all kinds of lubricants. And I have some of those. But you open my cupboard. The man came the other day and he needed lubricant. He asked me if I had this and this and this or that. And I said, no, I got the number 1 thing. What is that? That's that number 1 oil in there. That you click the little bottle can. You click the little can. And I have that. And that's what I use. And he used it, and he said, boy, that stuff works good. Yes, it does. It's worked good for years, and it still works good. And so, he said, but God can, and this penetrating, okay, applies to those needs and truths of God. Someone once said, a certain minister, he seems to be always preaching to the man in the moon. As one sits under the ministry of Dr. Ozment, he's moved to say, he's always preaching to me. So far, everything I've read this man has wrote has spoke greatly to me. Why? I'm an infinite human being. I am a finite human being. I'm a human being that was orchestrated by the devil for years. Do you know that he's still orchestrating his orchestra? The secret is to not hear it, not listen to it, not fall into that trap. Know when you're turning on God's orchestra and turning off the devil's orchestra. And here's some writings that will help you do that. Some ministers feel called of God to lead in a needed social reform of their day. Been there and done that. Be careful. That can be a trap of the devil to go to social reform of the day. It's usually not a spiritual thing you're looking at. To use their powers, especially against the sin of society, some ministers are led in the theological search and study. By the way, I have a degree, a master's degree in theology. And I got it with an 8th grade education. And I got it through a college that allowed me some liberties in my spelling and my writing and my types of things that I did. But I had the knowledge without the ability to be able to do the writing, a lot of it. They enrich the treasures of a man's knowledge. I love it. Here's a man that enriches the treasures in the treasure chest of God that is in the knowledge department in my life, in my head, in my body, in my books. I have a knowledge department this book will go in. And it will go in that department of knowledge. Do not lose this book. Do not let it out of your sight. Do not loan it to somebody you feel like is not going to eat it and bring it back. Other ministers feel their calling to devote themselves to what they think is personal, and the partial ministry, they help people find the way through the problems and trials of the daily living. You can give your life to the problems and trials of people in daily living. You will do much better to do what this man does, to give them the inability inside of them to override the daily problems and daily trials and daily emotion and daily things, so they don't have to come and sit down in front of a pastor and take his valuable time away trying to straighten them out on a matter that would be straightened out completely if they put the lust of the flesh away and follow the Spirit of God. And to digest this book will gain inspiration and understanding to live a more triumphant life. I live a triumphant life, but I want to live more triumphant. Everything so far that I've read that this man's written is above and beyond the just triumphant. I watched the Winter Olympics this year just a little bit. I watched those guys on skis with rifles. And they not only had to master speed, but they had to master the shot. Which was more important? To me, it was more important to hit the 5 targets, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, than it was to be the first guy in. If the first guy in missed the targets, he didn't win. Oh, he might have won the race, but he lost the battle. The battle was to hit all the 100% of targets. So we've got to be careful when we're running, that we run right, we run proper, and we run for the goal. If the goal was to hit all the targets, that's what was important. You could come in, you're running last, and get all the targets and be a marksman. Which is more important? To win a race or be a marksman? In this case, to be a marksman was the most important thing. You need to not forget. The most important thing when you're reading is to absorb what is for you. Absorb it. For many years it has been my privilege to enjoy the friendship of this consecrated and brilliant young minister. I love and admire him, Bob, very much, and I thank God for him. Charles L. Allen. I second the motion. He talks about temptation, number 1. He talks about burdens, number 2. And he says on the temptation, it's a challenge. And in that challenge, there's a choice. Make sure you make the right choice. Then when he talks about burdens, he said, hold fast the eternal. Forget the mundane. Forget that which is right here. And look forward to what is eternal. What am I doing today that is eternal? That's what's important. If you're doing what God would have you do, you're doing what was eternal. Jesus did what was eternal all the way through his life. Everything he did had to do with eternity. And that's what we are to do. And then he talks about trouble. And he talks about God, the light, and eternal. God is an eternal light. Came from heaven to light the hearts of every man who will accept him. Then he talks about death. Live life with God. Face death without fear. I am right now in a hospice situation with my wife. Home hospice. Right now. We talk about it. I talk about it. We talk about it together. I said, babe, when you get up there and you occupy our mansion, Jesus said, I'm building you a mansion, and you occupy our mansion, I said, be watching for me because I'm coming right behind you one day soon. I'll be there. You'll be in eternity and the time won't matter to you anymore, but here I am down here stuck in time. And for a little bit, I'm going to be here, but then I'll be there with you and we'll be forever together in the eternal heaven. And we'll live in that mansion on one street or another. Whether it's High Street or Low Street, it's going to be in heaven in a mansion. So, without fear, we can face death without fear. And let's surrender to God, especially in times when we have human grief. Human grief needs to be overtaken by spirituality. You can overtake human grief by spirituality. Yes, there's going to be a hole. Yes, there's going to be a little time of a temporary grief of that loved one going before you. But you need to undo that problem by searching for God. And then we're going to have the prayer of a man searching for God. I have God in my heart. I have the Lord in my life. I don't have to search any further. I have Him. What do I have to search for? I have to search for staying close to Him and having the peace in my life that He gives me. And then I don't have a problem. And then we have hope. That's the beginning of progress. When true hope comes into your heart, you have the beginning of progress. What is that hope? That hope's eternal. That hope we're talking about here is a positive hope, not a hope that I hope I get enough money to get food this week. I hope I got enough gas in my car to get to town. I hope this or I hope that. That's not what we're talking about. Or I don't have to say, I hope I get to heaven. I say, my hope is positive hope. I know I'm going to heaven. And that's it. And then faith. Light for life when things go wrong. While we're in this human body, things are going to go wrong. This man very gently, but God can, very gently introduces us to the challenge of everyday living with God at the helm. As long as He's at the helm, we've got no problems. As long as He's at the helm, we've got no problems. You can't step up and try to take a hold of the wheel yourself. You'll get in serious trouble. So don't do it. Follow what God gives you. Find these good books. Find this man, this author right here. Find out everything he wrote. And dig in and find it and get it. And read it. Along with the Bible. And you will grow spiritually. All I want to tell you that But God Can is a good book. Find it. Find it on your internet somewhere. Find it somewhere and buy it. Buy some and give it to somebody. Buy them a few for a gift and give them to people that are spiritual but are struggling just a little bit and get them through where they are. Well, this is Brother Peter with Tidbits from the Word. We'll see you next time. This was a little excerpt for this man, for this author. And I really appreciate to see a man like Charles Allen that came up behind the man and boosted him. So he doesn't have to promote himself. Somebody can promote him, and God will promote him, and God will raise him up on a high pedestal. Get this book. If you don't get any of his other books, get this one. It's one worth having. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.